Since in communities of color we have less access traditionally to capital, what we're going to talk about here is what happens as you're scaling up. Because it's great to want to have competition in the market, it's great to want to be able to compete with your competitors. It is very difficult to do so without cash. Scared money does not make money. No money hurts you. So we want to talk here with those who are not only finding the value and seeing the value in what's already been proven in terms of access to capital for women founders or founders of color, but we also want to talk about the risks. Hindsight's 2020. Because without reading the room and knowing the background of everyone, some of the conversation will be from ground up and talking about advantages, their tax advantages, to some specific vehicles. There are also risks. There are things that people discuss because they hear it spoken about so frequently, and then when you sit and talk to them, they truly don't understand what the convertible note is that they signed up for. And had they known early on what individuals would think about handing over equity in the very beginning, they would do things completely differently. So we want to talk to those who are doling out the cash. I'm using that term quite liberally. First, in terms of definitions. So, and we can do this popcorn style. First, I really want to talk about the different vehicles individuals can use. We won't focus too much on venture, but we can certainly touch on it. Different vehicles individuals can use depending on, and I just want to preface with this before handing it over to the panel, the type of business you have directly correlates to the type of money you should take. Scaling up quickly with a tech-based industry is very different than a product-based industry where having a loan and using credit cards just makes more sense. So while there's not one correct answer in terms of the type of financial vehicle that makes the most sense without taking into consideration what type of business you are actually the founder of and who your competition is so that your debt to equity ratio actually makes sense based on what your competitors are doing. So with that as the preface, we'll start at popcorn style. Right now, if there were one takeaway, if people doze out after the first 5 minutes of what's happening in the market right now in terms of investment vehicles, what would you say everyone should consider?
Everything.
I was going to say the same thing.
Great answer. Go ahead. You can elaborate.
So just a little bit more background about what I do. I work at Silicon Valley Bank, and for those of you who don't know, Silicon Valley Bank is focused on working with companies within the technology world and innovation as well. Been around for 35 years, and myself, I've been at the bank for 22. So I've worked with probably 1,000 or more founders. I think at any time, it makes sense to consider anything. And we've had some great speakers precede us, wow. Just to kind of touch on a few things that Tashonda and Julia said, it is a long game. And, building the right capital structure for your company, it's going to be different for each and every company. And I think what really matters most, we were talking about your character being very valuable, but also the character of the people that you choose to work with. And I think that really does apply to investors and other partners that you're going to come into contact with to help build your business. So I think the people are who really matter. The vehicle itself matters as well, and that's kind of why my gut reaction was everything.
I completely agree. I'm excited to be in this room because I'm deeply passionate about being able to democratize access to funding, and I think it's very important that we really stress that women, and especially women of color, have a hard time getting access to funding. And so that's why I do what I do. With that being said, VC is very sexy, but it's not for everyone, and it's not for everyone's business. And I always tell the founders that I meet with, I wouldn't give money to just anyone, so don't accept money from just anyone, because it's like a marriage, and it's a legally binding contract that is pretty hellish to get out of, and so you really want to make sure that you do your research.
I always come at it from a little bit of a different angle because on the one hand, I'm an entrepreneur or intrapreneur because I work in a corporate setting. I've built a business over the last 19 years in private wealth management basically working with entrepreneurs that have had the successes on this and have sold their businesses. So on the one side, I've been in the trenches like you, looking for the capital. On the other side, I am working with these families and family offices, and I see a lot of the entrepreneurs that they're investing in, and I see what makes them say yes. So the one thing that I'm seeing today is there's a lot of appetite for people to do direct investments. There's more money going to direct investments than I've ever seen before. It's almost like, it's like you bump into somebody back in the day, everyone was an investment banker. Today, everyone's a venture capitalist. And you're like, oh, you're a venture capitalist? What have you done? It's like, I have one investment. So I think that's good, because it means that there's opportunity and people are more open than they've ever been. I think we have this Me Too movement. There's an awareness. They actually know the statistics, and I've heard 4% or 6% of capital going to women. We're not even talking about women of color. And so there is a lot more awareness, and I think it's a good time to be able to capitalize on that.
So then my follow-up is going to have to be, and we can go this way because I think it's going to be very directed based on your responses. I want to put us within the framework of where the majority of founders tend to find themselves, and then the utopia, which is what the press presents. So when we talk about family offices and their interest in impact investing, which tends to sort of be where the lens is coming from, you also have this follow-up conversation of, we would love to be able to invest in, and I'm going to speak to the room here, women of color, but we don't know where to find them. To that end, it becomes very difficult for founders to be able to have access to family offices, because where that discrete lens of the interest in the particular projects they seek to invest in is very specific. So we can have an African app where people can travel, have the meeting with a family office, and if that's not their passion, they can say, we definitely met with a fantastic founder, but she's not within the portfolio of where we're interested. So how do we find matching the talent and the skills of the various founders with the appropriate family office vehicles where that match would make so much sense, but the access to the interconnectivity there's a dearth in that communication?
It's kind of interesting, because in venture, you articulate exactly what you like investing in. This is the space, this is the stage. Family offices are I guess frustrating in a way, because it's, one, family office means many things, and two, they all invest in different ways. What it comes down to, and I remember, I'm from Zambia, so the odds that I'm where I am is just beyond alien. And I would go out, and I started in the business. They said, okay, go and find 20 people with 25 million and up and make them your clients. I'm like, sure. Okay, I don't know anybody in town. I didn't even know that I lived on the Upper East Side. I lived on the Upper East Side, but I didn't know what it was. And so I kind of had to go with my gut, which was when I lived in Germany, I worked in sports fashion sales. And basically, I had the most sales with the people that I had the most fun with, because we had something in common. And so, click, people buy from people they like. And what do they like? They like people that have something in common. And so I just went with the three things that I knew. I worked in apparel, I'm black, and I went to Cornell. And those were my pillars, and those are my pillars. And I built my business based on that, because then I'd meet somebody who might be a family office. And I was, just using Cornell as an example, I studied the names on the buildings to figure out who probably has a family office, who probably has the level of wealth. When that annual report would come, I'd go right to the back, and I'd start with the biggest gifts and say, who are those families? And then figure out ways to kind of nicely stalk them. And what a coincidence, we bumped into each other. I became very, very active in the Cornell community. I went to every event that happened. I joined the Entrepreneurship at Cornell board. I joined the business school board. And these were checks that were really hard for me to write, but it was a check I was writing for access. And so when I think about what is the matching, I think the matching is find your people, find your tribe, find who you want to have a beer with 10 years after the day you meet them. Because they're going to be people who will be supportive of you in good days and bad. And if the business doesn't work this time and you start the next one, they'll still invest in you.
I actually thought those were very strong, actionable steps, and take excuses off the table. So I like that. So I'm looking for more. That was fantastic. So going back within the framework of consider everything, and you both referenced team members. And when individuals are putting forth investment capital, you are not just investing in the business, you're investing in the team. If there was something you could say about the red flag you've seen consistently with teams that don't work on your end, what would that red flag be? We know you don't want to divorce this partner, but this partner is going to tank you. They are the Titanic. What would you say?
I would say it's similar to what we heard earlier. When founders or co-founders don't put culture first, that's a big red flag. And then I also ask my founders, if you were to have to step down to save the company, would you? Can you put the company before yourself? And that's a big, big deal for me.
Those are great thoughts. Wow, having worked with so many founders, you see, sometimes you just see what will be successful. And I think it really is passion and having a vision. I think that when you're starting a company and you want to raise capital, I feel you must feel very anxious, and you must want to just get there as quickly as you can. But I can't emphasize really slowing down how you move through the funnel from thinking about things to actually closing your deal. And you really need to be able to articulate your vision for your business outside of the deck. I think if you need to move through a deck and think about, I guess, presenting, and you ever had that situation where you can't get the laptop to work and whoa, you should be able to articulate your vision and have someone feel it outside of the deck and outside of all the details. And I think when a founder can do that, when I'm meeting with them for the first time, that immediately takes my attention in a very unique way. And it sounds so basic, but it's something that you don't really see, I don't really see every day in what I do.
I'm going to move to sort of the economy now and the framework. Since we're at the start of the year, we have the luxury of sort of projecting forward. Right before the holidays, we saw turbulence, we'll say, a tumultuous climate. And that lends founders who are seeking capital to say, maybe will I have to do a down round? Should I be concerned with how much I'm seeking to raise based on the performance of how the market is doing? What does that mean for me long term? If you were to give your best advice without predicting the market, without saying you're going to time the market, and knowing that these founders are at various stages of capitalization, what's the best advice that you can generalize, taking the market's possibilities, moving into not just a new election, moving into global companies and Brexit, just taking all of the frameworks that we're working in when we're talking about how the market looks and when you're doing raises, what should they be considering?
I don't know, it's funny, yes, we saw the S&P go down 18% from the peak in September till December. It felt painful. Interest rates are going up. That hurts people's bond portfolios. Equity sold off. We have a certain somebody that is, being a bit of a baby about his wall. And so it's an interesting environment when it comes to family offices and ultra high net worth people, which is why what I do is such a great business. It's kind of recession resistant. And so, maybe my billions look a little bit less, but it's not going to move the needle. And so, if anything, they think of this as a time to go shopping. And and I think if people, and one, I'm not a fan of down rounds. I think it signifies weakness, and you never want to expose weakness. But, I think, people get worried about markets. What you should do is just focus on, you have a great idea, you have a great business, somebody should want to invest in it.
Just one thing to add on to that. I think that overly focusing on valuation, I feel, is a bad thing. We were talking about unicorns earlier. I've seen unicorns fail. And I also have seen situations where so much capital is being thrown at you, I guess that's a great problem to have. But taking the capital means you need to do something with it, and you need to create a return. So I feel it's really important to take a step back and give it some thought with respect to what's going on in the markets. If you have the right product market fit, it's probably appropriate to be seeking capital. There's a lot of capital in the market, especially in venture. These funds have raised lots of money in the past few years. They need to put it to work for their limited partners, and they will put it to work. So sometimes we'll see momentary sort of pauses where it seems like nobody's doing anything for a little bit, but it doesn't last very long, and people then start investing back in the market when they feel a little bit more at ease.
I mean, if you're going to IPO, then it has a different impact. But at the stage where I think most of you are, it shouldn't.
Yeah, just like you were saying, a lot of my money does come from family offices, and so there's no shortage of cash, and I'm just looking to deploy that cash whether, the stock market is doing well or not.
What opportunities do you think individuals are missing in terms of their connectivity with the different vehicles that you have available to them? Where's the missing link, or is there one?
Not sure I understand the question.
Do you find, is there a vehicle that you think is being underutilized by founders that if they took greater advantage of that specific vehicle, we could see more representation in the funding of women of color businesses?
I honestly don't think that it's on the people in this room to do the homework. And I mean, yes, be educated, be in the know. If you get an invite, take it. If you can reach out to someone and grab a coffee, do it. But I think it's on, in my specific case, the VCs to look outside of their network and try to find people that are in this room, because these are incredibly talented people. And so why not think out of the homogenous box a little bit more?
With respect to capital raising, I don't want to forget to say this. We do a monthly fundraising workshop where we will sit with a group of people over breakfast, and everybody in this room is welcome. So if you're interested, please see myself or my colleagues, Simon, Denisha, or Jeremy, who are mixing within the room. And this breakfast doesn't have any VCs in it. We'll talk to you and walk through what you need to think about at a pre-seed basis, a seed, and a Series A. And we'll give you resources and links to sort of start your process in organizing yourself as to how you'd like to approach things, and talk a little bit through some of the pitfalls and things to think about and not think about. And then we'll follow that up with companies that are interested in something we called safe spaces, where we'll sit with a founder, a team of us from my group, and we'll go through the presentation and sort of poke holes into it and play devil's advocate and try to give some advice for you and the next steps.
Well, I think I'd be remiss if I did not have those team members raise their hands and identify themselves so people could find them with ease since they've been identified. So we've got two, I think, were there 3 names listed?
Jeremy, Denisha, and Simon.
Score, here we are. Great trifecta. So I think to your point about looking outside of the box and not having this homogeneous network, I would imagine that's what led you to essentially create a business within the business that you've done. Can you give the room or provide more context into what caused you to decide to essentially create a fund within a fund, and what the feedback was within the organization, to the extent you can share, about the decision to do so? And do you think that's a trend that's going to be on the uptick in the coming years?
Well, the feedback and the support that I've gotten has been nothing short of extremely supportive. My managing director for the parent company is my partner on 2065. So I have full support to do what I need to do to make a dent in the market, to make a difference. And what led me to do this is anger, honestly. It just makes me angry. I mean, the typical funding that a white male receives is $1.3 million. For a black female, it's $36,000. That's disgusting. Let's see, of the billions of dollars that go into VC funding, women receive 2.7%, black women receive 0.2%. That's disgusting. So, and just looking at the numbers, the statistics, and also being the only woman in the room and the only woman of color in the room just made me angry. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And no. Have you found the anger that you felt, which I think not only would be personal, but contextually it can also be very specific, when you know that this room is an indication that there's no such thing as an anomaly, right? So there's excellence in abundance. Your perception and access to that is a very different perspective to those who do see the one person and you do strike as the anomaly. You will represent, you are that one person. as opposed to one of many fantastic individuals. How are you seeing that messaging translated when individuals can see that you can fill a room of talented, worthy, and worthy not in terms of character, worthy in terms of just, I mean, this is brass tacks business. These are businesses that can and do make money. And so taking the affinity outside of the equation, just saying if we're in the business of making money, we're missing money, has that caught on? Has that become a message? And what do we do to best evangelize that with fact-based numbers to continue to move this needle forward?
Well, I do think that, oh, go ahead.
I know. I was just going to say, I have 1.2 billion under advisement, and I've been told no so many times. It's incredible. And I've been told no in really nasty ways. Throw away my business card and never talk to me again kind of thing. And so I think when you get to that point, it's being able to create a forum for each other. And so I'm also, just in closing, offering to you, give me a topic so I can do a lunch together and I can put people in. It can't be a sell, but it can be educational. And so if you're saying, I've got a specific topic, I will commit that I'm going to put something together and give you that forum. And it's not because we're black women, it's because we're smart people and it's a smart investment, and they're going to meet you, not in the context of a black woman, they're going to meet you in the context of, here's somebody who is a subject matter expert and we're going to learn from them.
I think it's creating a narrative. I think we're on a journey, and I think things are getting better, but we still have a long way to go. I was in Boston at the Forbes Women's Summit, and Samantha Katz from Left Tackle Capital said that investing in women of color is the single greatest arbitrage opportunity of our lifetime. And I think that when people at a certain level start to acknowledge that there's so much power and opportunity in this room and in people that look like us and are doing what we're doing, that they're starting to pay more attention. And I think that things like this are also so important, but also journalism and stories and getting your faces out there, that's also very important.
Well, I want to give an opportunity for questions with B because we're going to wrap up, but I would be remiss if I did not allow the question, and then also make sure that there are parting phrases, whether these are action steps you'd like to see, whether there is something that you think was missed that's critical before people walk out of this room so that they're able to facilitate the funding that they're seeking, and just contact, whatever is best for you as a parting word. But B, yes.
Just curious, because we've all heard the stories and people like, woe is me kind of a situation. Hi, thanks, B. Arthur. And we all know each other, we all know the stories and the stats by now, but I'm really curious about what is the conversation like on the VC side, right? We all have our war stories, or they go to this, that, but since the original number, about 13 black women in the world who had raised over $1 million, that was in 2014. 2019, 5 years later, I think maybe there's 20 more. So it's not like the conversation has moved the needle that much. I mean, we're not getting a return on that kind of investment. So obviously there's a really big pipeline that we see here. What are VCs saying? Are they just like, oh, they're not that good enough? Like, they're still not being convinced that it doesn't seem like they're convinced.
I don't think it's that you're not that good enough. I don't think that they're not convinced. It's you're not in their network. It's when they're getting, decks coming in, when they're getting referrals to this, that, and the other founder, they don't look like you. And so I think that it's a network problem, and I also think it's an intentionality problem with them or us just needing to be more intentional about 25% of my fund is going to be dedicated to women or women of color. Like, you have to be intentional. It's not just going to happen.
We are going to close here. I think that's a very interesting and striking way for us to end on so many levels. I think that lends itself to great appreciation for the Arlen Hamiltons, in addition to the fantastic people we have here who've been very intentional about saying we recognize that there needs to be a shift in the dynamic that's happening with funding. We hope that we will carry this on into lunch. One thing I know is you don't sit between anyone and the food that they need to eat. And more importantly, I think these are conversations that we'd love to see continued individually on a case-by-case basis, because this is definitely a subject matter that can't be wrapped up in the amount of time allocated. So thank you so much. Thank you all very much. And
Thank you. Yeah.